The report summarizes our research and analysis of the human rights trends that we've seen in over 23 countries in Africa in the last year. And I would highlight at least three of the trends that we have seen. The first is that some of the most egregious human rights violations continue to cascade in the context of conflicts. Civilians have continued to bear the brunt of armed conflict, communal violence, political and social unrest, as well as government repression against critical and independent voices in several African countries. All of this have resulted in the destruction of lives and livelihoods, as well as massive destruction of private property and public infrastructure, all of which will take many years and probably cost billions in reconstruction. Armed insurgents and, in many cases, government forces have inflicted terror and horror on civilians caught amid the fighting and forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee both within and outside their national borders, where many face discrimination, rejection, and sometimes violent repulsion. In the at least 15 armed conflict afflicted African countries, including in the Sahel, the Lake Chad Basin area, the Great Lakes region, and the Horn of Africa, we have seen armed actors, government security forces, and non-state armed groups use indiscriminate and, in some cases, deliberate violence against civilians, private homes and businesses, as well as schools, hospitals, medical staff, teaching staff, and they have carried out several cases, incidents of sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. We've seen some of this in Cameroon's Anglophone regions, the Central African Republic, and then we have also seen, in the context of the resurgence of the M23 violence in Eastern Congo, amidst the ongoing violence in that region over the course of the last decade. In addition to all of that, we have in the last year, perhaps hopefully on its back leg now, the crises and conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Northwestern Nigeria, as well as the Northeast, it's never really ended, South Sudan, and Sudan's Darfur region. The second trend that I would like to highlight is around the growing incidence of political, religious, and social intolerance for difference, the use of hate and inciting speech, attacks on perceived political opponents, government neglect of minority and other vulnerable communities, increased contestation over resources and other factors which continue to drive communal tensions, insurgency, and extremist recruitment across Africa. The third trend, and that's the last one, is around the economic and social factors that have bedeviled Africa in the course of the last year. The post-COVID-19 environment, as it is across the world, has been marked by economic recession in many African countries, a growing food, fuel, and financial crisis that is precipitating political and social instability, as well as deepening poverty and inequality for millions of people on the continent. As I said earlier, the silver lining for me, and I think for all of us who work on human rights, amidst all of these crackdowns on freedoms of expression, association, and assembly, is that more and more people, especially among Africa's growing youth population, are becoming aware of their rights, and they are becoming less willing to sit back, silent and disinterested, as unaccountable government officials prioritize their personal interests over the public interest. We have seen a rise in the popular demand, street protests, demonstrations, for the rights respecting use of power, including in countries where autocratic leaders are holding sway, and people continue to do this at the risk of being arrested, detained, tortured, or even killed. On a more optimistic note, despite some remaining significant challenges, we have seen some progress around accountability and justice for serious crimes in Africa. And I'll give you 3 examples. The first is in the Central African Republic, where we have seen the Special Criminal Court in that country open its trials, at least the very first one, in what is for us a significant moment for victims of the grave crimes committed in that country's successive conflicts since 2003. We have also seen the International Criminal Court unseal warrants of arrest for notorious Seleka leader Nuruddin Adam. And in Sudan, the ICC opened a case against the notorious Janjaweed leader Ali Kosheb, the very first of the trial of an indicted militia leader for the crimes committed in Darfur. Finally, we saw the trial open in September of 11 perpetrators of the horrific crimes committed in the 2009 stadium massacre that we and several other groups documented in Guinea-Conakry, during which security forces of Dadis Camara's military junta killed at least 157 people and raped 109 women. The trends are a mixed bag. There is the good, there is the not so good, and there is the really, really bad. We're hoping to use the summary of our work over the year to continue to do advocacy, to press for change in laws, in policies, as well as in practice across Africa. I'm going to call on my colleague, Karine,